Right now, in a desert in southern Africa, a small black bird is sitting on a branch, watching a meerkat dig. The meerkat works at the sand and finally pulls out a fat, wriggling grub, and the bird, a fork-tailed drongo, screams. It's an alarm call, the specific piercing cry that means a predator is coming. Drop everything, run. The meerkat doesn't hesitate. It abandons the grub and bolts for its burrow, and the drongo calmly glides down, picks up the food the meerkat left behind, and eats it. There was no predator. There was never any predator. The bird made the whole thing up. We tend to think of lying as a uniquely human thing, a moral failure, something you learn, something you feel guilty about afterward. But strip it down to what it actually is, and lying is simpler and stranger than that. It's sending a false signal on purpose to make another mind believe something that isn't true, and the moment you define it that way, you start seeing it everywhere, in birds, in squirrels, in octopuses, in apes. In animals we'd always assumed were just running on blind instinct, so the real question was never whether animals deceive. They obviously do. The question is whether they know they're doing it, and the deeper you dig into that, the more unsettling the answer becomes. Start with the drongo because it's the clearest case anyone has ever recorded. In 2014, a researcher named Tom Flower published years of fieldwork following these birds across the Kalahari. What he found was not a simple trick. The drongo runs something close to a con. Most of the time, its alarm calls are real. When an actual hawk appears, the drongo sounds the warning, and the meerkats and other birds nearby scatter to safety. This is the genius of the whole operation. By telling the truth most of the time, the drongo builds trust. The other animals learn that this bird is a reliable lookout, worth listening to. They let it follow them around, and then, every so often, when there's a piece of food worth stealing, the drongo spends that trust on a lie. But Flower found something even sharper. The victims aren't stupid. After being fooled a few times by the same call, they start to ignore it. So the drongo adapts. It doesn't just have one false alarm. It can mimic the alarm calls of many other species, and it switches between them, rotating its lies so that no single victim ever fully catches on. Flower documented individual drongos producing dozens of different false calls, swapping to a new one the moment the old one stopped working. That is not a reflex. A reflex doesn't notice when it's failing and change tactics. That's a strategy, run by a brain the size of a peanut. Now look closer to home. This next one is probably happening in a park near you. Gray squirrels bury thousands of nuts every autumn to survive the winter, and rival squirrels are constantly trying to dig them back up and steal them. So squirrels developed a counter move. When a squirrel believes it's being watched by a potential thief, it will dig a hole, go through the entire motion of burying a nut, pack the dirt back down, and walk away, having buried absolutely nothing. The real nut is still tucked in its mouth or cheek. It's a decoy, a staged performance meant to send the watcher to the wrong spot. Researchers found that squirrels do this far more often when another squirrel is nearby and visibly paying attention than when they're alone. They are responding specifically to being observed. In some basic ancient way, they are managing what another mind believes it just saw. It gets stranger underwater. A male cuttlefish trying to court a female has a problem. Larger, more aggressive males will chase him off the moment they spot him moving in. So certain smaller males have found a solution that sounds physically impossible. The cuttlefish splits its own body into two separate messages. On the side, facing the female, it flashes the bold, pulsing colors of a courting male. On the side, facing the rival, it displays the soft mottled pattern of a female. To the female, he's a suitor. To his competition, he's just another girl, no threat at all. Nothing worth fighting over. One animal, telling two different lies at the same time to two different audiences, written across the two halves of its own skin. Still, you could argue that all of this is just clever instinct. Hardwired tricks that happen to work, so evolution kept them. To lie in the way we actually mean it, you'd need something more. You'd need to understand that other minds exist separate from your own, and that those minds can hold beliefs that are different from what you know to be true. For a long time, scientists were certain that this ability, the thing they call theory of mind, belonged to humans alone. Then they started studying ravens. A team at the University of Vienna, led by Thomas Bugnyar, knew that ravens hiding food will return and move it if they think a rival watched them stash it. Useful, but maybe just a response to seeing another bird. So they designed a sharper test. They let a raven hide food in a room with a covered peephole in the wall, a hole through which the raven could not see another bird, but could hear one on the other side. the ravens still grew paranoid. They still hurried to rehide their food, guarding it against a competitor they couldn't actually see, simply because that peephole was open and a rival might be looking through it. The raven wasn't reacting to a bird in front of it, it was reacting to the pure idea of being watched. It was imagining another mind, in another room, and adjusting its lies to fool a creature it couldn't even lay eyes on. And this is where the whole subject tips over from impressive into something that genuinely gets under your skin. Because notice the pattern. We keep moving the line. First we said animals don't deceive at all. Then, faced with the Drongo, we said, fine, they deceive, but it's pure instinct. Then, faced with the raven, we admitted, okay, some of them grasp the concept of being watched, but surely they can't plan a lie in advance. Surely they can't sit on a deception, hide their own intentions, and wait for the right moment. Surely that, at least, is ours alone. In a zoo in Furuvik, Sweden, there was a chimpanzee named Santino. Every morning, before the zoo opened and before any visitors arrived, Santino did something the staff couldn't make sense of at first. Calmly, peacefully, with no one around to provoke him, he would walk the perimeter of his enclosure gathering stones, and he'd build small piles of them hidden behind rocks and structures, positioned near where the crowds would later gather. He did all of this in a relaxed, unbothered state. Then, hours later, when the visitors showed up, Santino would suddenly erupt, snatch up his hidden ammunition, and hurl the stones at the people watching him. A researcher named Matthias Osvath studied Santino for years and realized what he was witnessing. Santino was planning. In the quiet of the morning, in a completely calm mood, he was preparing for a future emotional state he wasn't even in yet, stockpiling weapons for an anger he didn't currently feel. That alone broke a rule scientists thought was unbreakable. But it went further. When the keepers began finding and removing his visible piles, Santino started hiding them better, tucking stones under hay, concealing them behind objects where the staff wouldn't look. And he learned something else. He learned to stay completely calm as visitors approached, to show no aggression whatsoever, to give away nothing right up until the instant he attacked. He was concealing not just the stones, but his own intentions. A chimpanzee in a Swedish zoo was deliberately suppressing his own behavior to keep the humans from knowing what he was about to do. He was lying with his entire body about the future. So go back to the Drongo in the desert, the scream, the meerkat fleeing, the stolen grub left behind in the sand. On its own, we'd call that a trick, a fluke of evolution, a bird doing a thing that happened to work. But stack it next to the squirrel burying nothing, the cuttlefish wearing two faces at once, the raven afraid of an eye it can't see, and the chimp quietly building his arsenal in the empty morning, and a very different picture starts to form. Deception isn't a glitch in animal behavior. It may be one of the clearest windows we will ever get into whether anything is truly thinking in there at all. Because to lie well, to really pull it off, you have to understand that other creatures see the world differently than you do. You have to hold their mind inside your own mind, and then choose, on purpose, to plant something false in it. The most human thing about us, it turns out, might not be our honesty. It might be our talent for the opposite. And we are very, very far from the only ones who have it.